This show is brought to you by Victor Nawrocki Realtor, experienced real estate agent serving Disney and the greater Orlando area of celebratingflorida.com. Have you ever dreamed of living where the magic happens? Victor Nawrocki has made that dream come true for himself and others. One of the biggest decisions you'll make when considering a move is selecting a realtor who can successfully match you with the right home in the right location at the right price. If you're looking to buy or sell in the Orlando area, here's why Victor is the realtor you'll want in your corner. Victor knows the Disney area like the back of his house. By creating a free, no-obligation account on his website, celebratingflorida.com, you'll unlock the website's full potential and be able to enter specific criteria, save listings, and browse new properties sent to your email. Is it time to follow your dream? Victor is looking forward to helping you discover the real estate opportunities that are right for you in this beautiful and fun-filled part of Florida. Visit celebratingflorida.com today or view Victor's view at victorsvista.com and let Victor know the Solo Show sent you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is our final boarding call and the doors will be closing soon. Please board quickly and safely. Please stand clear of the doors. Thank you.
Broadcasting from the Solo Studios, where we mix the elixir of life known as the S'mores Latte for the Wilderness Lodge's Roaring Fork. Yum. Here in Winnipeg, Manitoba, the center of North America, on this little planet we call Earth, this is the Solo Show. On this adventure, Stan welcomes the godfather of the Disney podcast, Lou Mongello, to the guest host's chair for a talk about the amazing guests that he has interviewed over the years. You definitely want to stick around for this. So now, please welcome your host, the guy who bought the computer its first pair of tennis shoes. Here's Stan Solo. I gotta have another of those s'mores lattes.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Solo Show. I am Stan Solo as always, and I have a very special guest today. I'm sure you know him. He is the winner of the Best Travel Podcast 9 consecutive years, author of 4 books, including his new one, The Disney Interviews Volume 1. 7 audio tours, 600 podcasts and counting, countless live videos and events. You're a good friend, whether you have met him yet or not. Mr. Lou Mongello. Lou, welcome to the show.
Speaking of good friends, Matt, it is great to see you, Stan.
Oh, it's been too long. So you got a new book out, Volume 1? Is this a hint? Is this what's going on here?
By putting Volume 1, I put a lot of pressure on myself. I'm like, well, now there's got to be Volume 2. It's Volume 1 of who knows how many. Like you said, I've been podcasting for 15 plus years, and I've been very fortunate to have conversations with people that I think I and probably you and other people look up to and whose work I appreciate and admire, and it's just wanted to try and share their conversations with people in a new way.
Excellent. And I literally I'm finished. I got 2 pages left. I just finished the book before we went on. And it is, all these interviews are from the WDW radio podcast. They're all basically word for word taken straight from the podcast. So you could go and listen to them. But I got to tell you, reading them in order, and all of the people that you have in this book that you interviewed are people that had personal relationships with Walt or worked with Walt or directly under Walt or they met Walt. And it's amazing to read them in order this way because they all have something to say about the man himself. Was intentional, I'm guessing?
Yeah, without a doubt. So this first volume is definitely positioned as people that worked with Walt or, like you said, directly with Walt, or in cases like Dave Smith were really there to help sort of preserve the legacy of Walt Disney. And you're right. And one of the things I wanted people to take away from my conversations with them was talking about their relationships with Walt and hearing so many of the consistencies and commonalities in terms of how they spoke about the man, not just him as a boss or him as a creator, but Walt the person. And there's a lot of sort of common threads that flow through, which I think speaks volumes about Walt himself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. And it is an awful lot of common threads as you read. One person will tell the exact same story that the next chapter somebody will say. I've been wanting to get Lou on the show. I've been podcasting now. Geez, it's coming out of it's over 3 years. I've been having podcasts. said, I've been wanting to get Lou on, but I've been always wanting to wait until a special time. I wanted to get a good thing. Everybody knows his backstory. If you don't know his backstory, go listen to his backstory. It's fascinating. We don't have time to talk about that today. So this book, I figured what we will do is we'll talk about this book. Christmas is coming. This will make a great Christmas present for any Disney. It's available on Amazon. So we'll post a link in the show notes to www.radio.com, and he has the links to Amazon and wherever else you can get it. But I thought we'd go kind of almost chapter by chapter, and I don't want to spoil the book for people and read the book for everyone. But what I would like to do is kind of get your thoughts during these interviews or different things that they talked about. So the first one you talked to is Ralph Kent. He was a marketing production artist. He was working with Walt in 1964 and the World's Fair. And he created the first Mickey Mouse watch, or the first, I guess, collectible Mickey Mouse watch, because they're doing kids ones before that. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, and it's funny, Ralph, and part of the reason why I put Ralph in and Ralph holds sort of a special place in my heart, because he was probably the very first sort of Disney legend that I got to interview. I remember going to his house here in Orlando. This is probably back in 2005 or so. And I was so nervous. I had no idea what I was doing. I had like all these questions written out and he, really like everybody else, Stan, was just so warm and so inviting. I mean, literally inviting me into his home and showing some of the things that he had collected over the years, and like his window on Main Street literally was sitting there in his office.
Which you tried to steal, if I recall.
I did. And I'm still trying to steal it. Still to this day, I try and break in every few weeks.
And is everyone in this that you interview, everyone a legend?
So I believe that...
Feels that way.
I think who might not be a legend. No, I think Al Konechny might not be a legend yet, and Sully might not be a legend yet. So there are a couple. So legend is sort of an air quotes. I think they are legendary, but they might not have the official title of Disney legend.
The majority of them do. Well, the majority
Correct.
of them that you interview.
Or I think will be. I think guys like Tom Nabby probably eventually will be too.
George McGinnis was the second chapter, and he was credited to be the last Imagineer hired directly by Walt. Is kind of his claim to fame, or that's a cool fact about him. And you asked him about, I know that you don't like this question, but I'm going to ask you anyways. You asked him, what do you think Walt would think about Epcot if he were to see it now? So I'm going to ask you that, seeing as how you felt good enough you could ask George that. What do you think? How do you think Walt would have felt about Epcot today?
So I'm going to give you the recovering attorney answer, meaning I think we don't know what Walt had in his mind's eye in terms of what he wanted Epcot to look and feel like. So I'm sure what we have today is probably not what he had in his mind. However, I think seeing what the Imagineers came up with and the creative solutions and still that mission and intent of not Epcot, the futuristic city, but Epcot, the showcasing of new and emerging technologies, making the world a better place, making the world a smaller place, having these nations in World Showcase literally sort of being side by side, metaphorically hand in hand around the lagoon. I want to imagine he would like it. I'd be curiouser and curiouser to see what he would think of what the plans are or were, because they may have changed, that were announced at D23 for what the future of Epcot might hold too, with these different neighborhoods and some of the different pavilions that are coming.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing with Epcot. It's nearly impossible to keep showcasing future technology, because the future technology happens before they get a chance to showcase it.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been the problem with Tomorrowland, right? By the time they get the attraction built, I mean, look at Carousel of Progress. By the time that final scene is done, it's already outdated technology, because, the technology is doubling. It used to be every 7 years. Now I think it's every 5 years. And it's probably even less than that.
That's just it. Exactly. Chapter 3, we go to Alice Davis. I think this was my favorite chapter in the entire book. Yeah, for somebody that's thinking about getting, you just go straight to Alice Davis. That's the one you want. And he talks an awful lot. She talks about the first time she met Walt, being in dinner, and her husband, of course, already had known Walt, and so he came down and kind of sat down and chatted with him for a bit. And you mentioned the edit in the book. It was the first and only time you ever had to edit somebody in one of your podcasts. that must have been crazy shocking for you to, to have that.
So I do have a personal affinity for this interview. Again, Alice is the kindest, sweetest woman. She invited me into her home, where, she lived with Mark Davis. So there's amazing artwork all over the walls. Like there's, original stuff just everywhere. And, she invited me into Mark's studio and so many other things. But she's still to this day, 600 plus episodes, all the live videos, the only person I ever had to edit to keep the show as G-rated. I left it in there in context, but I edited out the single word. So she will forever hold that distinction.
And I love your editing on that one. It was amazing. It was beautiful. And for people that are wondering, what are we talking about? Just go buy the book. It's that's what you gotta do.
But it was so sweet. Like it was so innocent. Like there was nothing dirty or blue about what she said.
Mm-hmm. Then David Smith, he's the Walt Disney Archives. He talked about archiving Walt's desk. He was like there was other people that went in, like his family went in and took out personal items and whatnot. But he was talking, he had to go in and take pictures of every angle. And he was counting how many paper clips were in the drawer and whatnot. He had to, it was great that the company thought so much about it that they waited. And it was a few years after the fact that he actually went in. You asked him, so he works in archives, and you asked him, what would you take from the archives as your retirement gift? So, and he didn't want anything. He's very humble. I got the impression. Now I'm going to ask you. You got free reign of the archives. I know you're trying to purge everything you own, but what are you taking from the archives? And don't say I'm not taking anything, because it should be for the people.
Oh no, I'm totally taking something. It is. I mean, it's sort of that final scene of Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? Because that's to a certain degree what it looks like. And if you watch on Disney Plus, if you watch the the name just escaped me. Prop culture, right, where they sort of give you a little peek into what's in there. It sort of looks like that. Do you take something from the parks? Do you take something from one of your favorite movies? There's that selfish idea that, God, I want something from, Walt personally, but do you also feel so respectful of Walt and the archives that it's best that it's left there instead of hidden in my office somewhere? So clearly I'm stalling for time because I have no idea. Like maybe there would be something from Walt, to take a piece of something from Walt Disney, maybe a personal effect from his desk.
Tie clip would have been.
Yeah. A Walt's iPad. I want Walt's iPad.
Yeah. I think something personal Walt would be really, really cool too. Or a 2000 League submarine in your backyard would be good too.
Right. I mean, I need a bigger house to find a place to put it. But
next up was Julie Andrews, and in your interview with her, you talk about you had to clean out the house you're still cleaning on. You had 3 recorders going. And you had Marion and Diana and Nicholas leave the house. They weren't allowed to be around when you were interviewing her. And she finished the interview, and I think she said, "Thank you very much, Lou," in her proper British accent. And you got off, and you were completely emotional, you were saying in the book. And you mentioned this on the live show as well, how emotional you were after chatting with Julie Andrews. Has that happened again since with anybody that you've interviewed?
Yeah, I mean, it's happened a few times because remember, Stan, I'm a fan first. So these conversations are ones that I just as a fan would love to have with these people. The ability to share them with you and others is a bonus. It's a blessing to be able to do that. So, the first time I spoke, and I don't want to sound like it's name dropping, but like the first time I spoke to Richard Sherman and then developed a friendship with him, and traveled with him, and things that he said or things that he did for me or my family have brought me to tears more than once, and moments that I will never forget. So, like I said, even if nobody ever listened to the interviews, even if nobody ever read them, like having those moments as a Disney fan are the most meaningful.
Yeah. And I've kind of felt that way too. Like you're very passionate about what you do, and you speak about Richard Sherman, and Richard Sherman's actually the next one to come up in the thing. And you talk about 2 very personal experiences that happened with yourself and your family, your kids in particular, with Richard Sherman, in the book. And I remember I was in, you had the box. What do you call it now? The sandbox? Or what is it now? I like the box. So I was in the box, and you were on the cruise, on the Richard Sherman cruise. And you had like about 500 box people with you in the on that cruise, and you did a live show. I remember watching it I think I was in bed actually with my iPad, and I was watching you do the live show, and you took the time to introduce everybody in the box to Richard Sherman, and he played a little bit of piano, and I remember Becky was there, and quite a few people that were on the cruise were off to the side watching as well. And you do this a lot. You do it a lot of live shows. You'll go to Disneyland opening night cars, and instead of enjoying the time for yourself, you'll go and do the live broadcast for us, for the people in the box. I find that this is important to you to do these live broadcasts. Do you realize how important it is to us when you're doing these?
Not until this very moment right now. Yeah, I mean, maybe I probably don't, right? I probably don't. But to your point, look, you give me an incredible gift. You talk about getting emotional. You changed my life, right? You individually and you collectively changed my life by listening, by affording me the opportunity to do this. So if I'm able to have an experience, whether it's going to something special or going to the parks, and be able to share that with you in a way where we're having a dialogue, right? One thing about the podcast, it's the core of what I do and I love it, but it's sort of a one-way thing, right? I put it out there and then you wait for the response. Live video, man, there's nothing like it because we're having a conversation. We're seeing things and experiencing them together as it happens. And to be able to sort of get that real-time feedback, like, totally fuels my fire. And these events and these experiences are better when you can share them with friends. And that's how I feel, not just about you because we've known each other, but anybody that takes the time to listen.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you because you've done so many of these live videos that I was able to witness from my home here in Winnipeg, Canada. The opening of the Galaxy's Edge, the opening of Toy Story Land. I don't think you did Toy Story Land, or did you? I don't remember. I wasn't in for that one.
Yes, because it was like 8,000 degrees outside and there was no shade.
But the one in particular I really remember was when you showed us Richard Sherman on the ship and on the Disney ship, and that was one that it was very, very special night. And it's really cool as a fan of yours and of Disney. Now I'm reading this book and you talk about the cruise, and I go, even though I wasn't on the cruise, I felt like I was part of it. So it's great.
There's no better compliment that you could have paid me than saying that, because that's exactly what I hope that people feel like.
So Charles Ridgway is the next chapter, and he's the PR for Disney. He retired in 2004 after 30 years with the Disney company. He talks about the reporting of the grand opening in Disneyland and how it was kind of a mess for things. He remembers it fondly. He admits it in the book. You were at Walt Disney World shortly after it opened. You weren't there opening week, but you were there the first year that it opened. When you got back to school after doing that, do you remember, were you the reporter when you went back to school after your first visit and telling all your friends, oh man, you got to see Walt Disney World? Was it ingrained in you that young of an age?
So I was only 3. So we went in November of 71. So yeah, it was just a few, but you know what? So Stan, and the individual memories are sort of wonderfully muddled over those early years, because we did go every year. So I wouldn't be able to tell you one trip versus the next.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling, and my parents always told me, they said, yeah, from that first time that we went, there was something, and still remains, something special about that place, the way that we all felt, the way that I, even as a child, reacted to it. So I probably did. I probably ran back and told my friends in school and my teacher, all about my trip. I was podcasting before there was podcasting, relaying the experience to people, because obviously it meant so much that it impacted my trajectory in an incredible way.
Yeah, well, that's just it. Like, I remember being in school and none of us went to Disney when I was nobody. One kid did. He was actually one of my best friends. He went, and he came back and he was telling us about Disney Quest and this giant pinball machine that they had there and these huge video games that you could play. And it was just fascinating to me too. And I had a thirst to want to go, like, before the 70s, like listening to Uncle Walt and the Wonderful World of Color. I had a thirst of wanting to go to the parks, and when he came back, it just fed me even more wanting to go. And I picture you going back after visiting Walt Disney World at 8, 9, 10 years old, and going back and telling all your friends and being, like you said, the podcaster before you were the podcaster, the unofficial reporter, as it were. Marty Sklar Wow, what can you say about Marty Sklar? He and many others in the book talk about working directly with Walt, and that's one of the things I loved about this book is how it all, even though they're in different interviews, they all tie together with Walt. And how is it for you as a fan to be basically chatting with one of the, to me, Marty Sklar is one of the biggest legends in the book. To be chatting with Marty Sklar about his experiences talking with Walt. What was that like for you?
Well, it's I think it's you're sort of one step away from Walt, and I think of all the people that I had a chance to speak to, even probably more so than a Richard Sherman. I think Marty, being Walt's right hand man, was incredibly and intimately familiar with Walt, not just the person on TV, not just the person giving a speech, but Walt, the friend and the human being, and even taking that out of the equation. Marty was a remarkable person. He reminded me of, a warm, friendly uncle from the moment that you met him. There was no air of arrogance or superiority to him. It was as if you were sitting with a member of the family. And as I watched him sometimes at other events speak to other people, there was that similar type of warmth. And I said, that's a special quality of somebody who has such a prominent role in the company. And like a lot of these people, Stan, getting a chance to have, and more importantly, to record and share a conversation before they passed, I consider myself very, very fortunate to have been able to do that.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the impression I get from the interview about Walt. What I found interesting was a lot of the interviews, it came up more than once, how he wouldn't really directly say to somebody, "Oh, that's awesome. I love it. That's great." He would just say, "That will do," and move on. And sometimes people would take that the wrong way. They'd be kind of like, "Well, I worked my heart out for this. That will do." But then he'll go to another department and he'll say, "You should see what they're doing next door at the other department. It's amazing." And of course, they'll run over there and tell them. And that's how the compliments were kind of passed on almost. It's an interesting way of managing, I think. The way.
Yeah. And I think there's probably some people that can say, "Oh, wait a minute. That's what my mom and dad do. They might not tell me to my face, but they go and tell everybody else." And I think Walt was an incredible leader of people in terms of knowing how to get the most out of the people that he worked with or that worked for him, even if they didn't think you can do it. When you get somebody who's used to working in animation and then all of a sudden you put them into the theme park role and they say, "Walt, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not a theme park guy." And he says, "No, you're a storyteller. And all you need to do is tell these stories in 3D." And then all of a sudden, these guys are and women are able to create this amazing place because he was able to make them realize that they were capable of doing it, and so much more.
Yeah, giving them more potential than they thought they had.
Yep.
The next one you interviewed in the book, in the next chapter, was Bill Sullivan, or Sully as he is known, and he talks an awful lot about what would come to the department. He would come and visit us, and kind of like what we were talking about. What I can't fathom is the Walt Disney Company at this point. Like, it's not as huge as it is now by any stretch of the imagination back 50s, 60s, but it was still a fairly big department. There was offices in New York. There was, the design company, the animation company. There was a lot of things going on, and all of them talking about Walt coming to visit them. How often do you ever get an impression of how often this would happen?
There's a quote of Walt, and I'm paraphrasing, that he was in the parks one day and a little kid asked him, when Walt used to walk around Disneyland, I said, "Walt, Mr. Disney, do you draw the cartoons?" He says, "No, I don't draw them anymore." He says, "Oh, well, do you do the voice of Mickey anymore?" No. He says, "No, I have other people that do that." He says, "Well, do you make the movies?" He says, "No, I have a team." And the kid would keep on asking him all these questions. And he says to him, "Well, what is it that you do, Mr. Disney?" And he says, "I'm a bumblebee." And he says, "I basically go to all of these different locations and these different people, and I sort of help pollinate with ideas and like we were saying, get the most out of them." So I think as much as he was able to, especially in those early formative years, I think he probably did make it a point to go and literally and figuratively touch these people in their offices. And look, Alice Davis would talk about it. She talked about how, and in Mark's studio in her home, they had the chair, and it was literally Walt's chair in Mark's office that was next to his desk. And Walt would come in and he'd sit down and say, "What are you working on?" what are you working on today? And would spend the time with him. And I think a lot of these people probably had their own version of Walt's chair. And as he went and pollinated, it wasn't just so Walt could find out what they were doing. It's so that he was there. There was a presence to him, and he was sort of acknowledging these people just by being there. And I think that's a remarkable leadership skill.
Yes, I think so. I guess it would depend as far as how often he would go. Like Alice Davis, he would come in and he would say, "Oh, that'll do. I'll see you next Tuesday at 1:00." And so it sounds like it was almost like a weekly thing, or depending how important the project was.
I'm sure there was a little bit of fear too, like, oh, Walt's coming. They sort of, there's a code word, the eagle has landed, and everybody sort of runs around and gets ready. But then Richard tells the story of Walt coming in on Friday. This is a well-known story, but of Walt coming in on Friday afternoon and saying, "All right, boys, play it," and asking them to play Feed the Birds. There was a lot of the human side to Walt Disney are the stories that are the stories I love hearing most.
Yeah. The Tom Noble, is it Noble or Nabel?
Tom Nabby.
Nabby. I'm way off. That's names. I found his stories to be one of the most fascinating, talking about selling newspapers outside the gates of Disneyland at the age of 12. And he's retiring as a Disney legend. He had seen so much and he accomplished so much with the Disney company that his story about Disneyland letting people catch fish was absolutely hilarious. I think that was one of my favorite stories in the whole book. At the end of the interview, you asked Mr. Nabby if there was any one moment or one thing that you look back with those memory or fond memory. Now you've been podcasting for, is it 20 years, 15? It's been more than 15 years.
More than 15, yeah.
Because I met you, it was like your fourth year of WW Radio when I first met you. So, and it's been a long time. You've been podcasting. You've had a lot of memories. Is there a fond memory that you can look back on and remember?
Picking one, I would almost sort of, I don't want to devalue any by picking one.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
But a lot of the things we're talking about are some of those memories, talking to Julie Andrews, meeting Richard Sherman, talking to Marty Sklar, people whose names we've
got to be up there too. Getting the first books published and stuff like that must be up there.
Yeah, and Stan, it may be lame, but it's the honest answer. And it's people, right? Again, growing up as somebody who didn't have a lot of friends. When I say people, I don't mean the people that we're talking about today, but the ability to meet people, to make friends with people like you, who we share not just a common love for Disney, but I think there's just a lot of values and ideals that sort of run through us. And it's been the relationships that I've made. Every single one has been the most important part. And while that might sound like a cop-out lame answer, it's
very, very political, very political.
Well, but because it's true, I could say, oh God, the first time I went to this or saw the opening of whatever, or got invited to, the first media event I got invited to, like, was wow. Like I'm,
Are you sure it wasn't the Grease concert that you did? Those proud moments.
Never gonna happen.
Proud of that. Very proud of that moment. So then the next chapter, the second last chapter, was Al Kozinski. I get pronounced.
I know Al Konechny, not a name that is recognizable or rolls off the tongue.
Does not roll off the tongue. So he was the idea man for the Disney company, and he was the guy that came up with the idea for the famous Mickey Mouse lunchbox, the tin lunchbox that looked like shaped like a school bus. They sold 9 million of those.
Right.
How do I not have one? The Mickey Mouse pen dispenser, the night lights. He made a deal with GE to get the night lights and whatnot. He designed the box for the coonskin hat for Davy Crockett, which is, I didn't know they came in. Did you know they came in a box before that?
I didn't. I just figured they were sort of hanging on a hook, somewhere. But
that's what I figured, like a plush animal. That's how I figured they would be. So oftentimes when I do an interview with somebody, I'll find out something about them afterwards, or I'll be, I completely forgot to ask them about this. Was there anything you found out about Al, Mr. Kozinski, afterwards that you're like, I really wish I knew that during this interview, or anyone else that happened to where you were like, I completely forgot to ask him about this, or because of time I didn't ask him about that?
Wow, that's a great question, Stan. Because I will tell you that one of the things I do, and It's funny being an attorney and being a trial attorney beforehand. Being prepared is the most important part. And for me, not just because of my background and not just because I talk about something that is so meaningful to me and where we as guests have such a high level of expectation, but out of respect for my guests, I would always do an inordinate amount of research and preparation, because you better believe if they're going to give me their time, which is their most valuable commodity, you better believe I'm going to be prepared and have 3 times as many questions ready to go than the time I would have. It's interesting. I bet you if I went back and looked at questions I had prepared for somebody like a Julie Andrews, like where you could spend all day talking to her, are there any that I didn't get to? I don't know. Because a lot of times, even if, we would sometimes talk after the recording would stop, I'd be like, oh my God, is it okay if I put this in? Because, there's just some gold. There's another story that you shared. And I've spoken to, and I've had Richard on the show. I think we did 3 podcast episodes. So being able to go back and revisit and then hearing them remember stories that maybe they forgot the first time and sharing them in their own voice has been.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because that happens to me all. I try to research, but I'm not nearly as good as research as you are. I don't have that lawyer quality of doing that. But
it's just helping people. It's just helping people tell their story. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. The final one was Lonnie Burr, who is the Musketeer, and I don't have very much memory of the Mickey Mouse Club at all. I don't think I may have watched one episode at once upon a time. I don't think we ever got it in Canada while I was alive. We didn't have the Disney channels or anything like that. So it was hard for me to relate to Mr. Burr's story. But it did get me thinking about The Wonderful World of Color and growing up watching that. And that sparked my interest and my desire, my want to visit Disneyland in particular. And as I got older, Disney World. And I think there was a lot of people, I talked to a lot of people that are from your and my generation, and that's their story, is they learned about Disneyland from listening and watching The Wonderful World of Color. Now, Disney doesn't really do that too much anymore. They're getting better at it with Disney Plus, and they have like the Animal Kingdom story on Disney Plus. They're doing the prop culture that we talked about that kind of is sparking interest on different things, like when they were doing different attraction vehicles. Do you feel Disney is missing out on that? Are they not taking care of the future generations the way they used to in the 70s, 80s, 90s?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that come into play, right? Because if you think back, and I mean this with all reverence and respect, Michael Eisner sort of wanted to take on that Disney-like role. He wanted to not just be the CEO of the company, but he wanted to be this next generation's version of Uncle Walt, being on TV, being not just the executive of the company, but being the face of the company, which I think is a very, very difficult thing to do. I think Bob Iger, while he is very much front facing, he has never really sort of wanted that role. And I think there's a lot of different reasons why there's not a single representative face, quote unquote, face of the company right now. One, there is only one Walt Disney, and I don't think anybody can really step into those shoes, much as Michael Eisner may have wanted to try. There was something, Walt had, I think, a unique quality and characteristic of being so well liked, so inviting and approachable and warm, even through that black and white television set, that it's very, very hard to authentically replicate. And I'm not sure that the company wants a single individual to sort of be that figurehead of the company in terms of relationships with audience and guests. So there are a number of different people that have that and make that, but in smaller ways, especially now since the company has grown so much, right? So if you're a Star Wars fan, Filoni or now Favreau, right, are sort of the people that you connect to. If you're a Marvel fan, Feige, I think I love Kevin Feige for 1,000 different reasons. And then even on smaller scales, whether it's Disney Channel or Disney Plus, there are a number of different individuals, but not a single one that is sort of that sort of lone figurehead or spokesperson for the company.
Yeah, absolutely. And they are doing a bit, I guess. Like you have the Christmas Day parade every Christmas Day, and now they're showing that on Disney Plus. So they're promoting the parks But I'm afraid, and I shouldn't be, because the parks are more popular now than they've ever been. Maybe not 2020, but generally speaking, the parks are more popular than they've ever been. But I talk to kids today, and I'm growing. I'm in Canada, and they don't even know a Disneyland or a Disney World, which is shocking to me when I find that out. When I talk to small children, 8, 9, 10-year-olds, they don't even know this place exists. So I have this idea, and I want you to go to Disney Plus with this idea. They need to promote,
because I can just knock on their door. But go ahead, for argument's sake.
Just go there and say, Stan sent me. He has an idea. and
this is what's going to, just so you know, guys, this is what's going to happen going forward. Stan said this.
Voiceover guy Ken says, Stan never has ideas. Stan only has great. I have this great idea. They need to promote the parks more, and they need to have a snack show or a dinner show where somebody goes and tries all the different snacks and all the different meals at Disney World, Disneyland Paris, Hong Kong Disney, Disney Sea, Tokyo Disney. And you're the guy to do it. You're the guy that should be visiting the parks and doing these videos for them. What do you think?
I love every part of that sentence. You're my favorite human being in the world right now. It's kind of what I try and do on the show anyway. I mean, there's a lot of talk about food, and I have the physique to prove it. I think look, as parks fans, we would love the more park stuff, the better on places like Disney Plus. But look, that's also the beauty, Stan, of where we are in this generation, where we as guests, as consumers, don't have to wait for Disney to do something official, because there's no more gatekeeper, because there are podcasts and so many different voices and opinions. There's live video, there's YouTube, there's blogs, there's books, there's all this content from fellow fans. And I think we as consumers like consuming content from other consumers, because there's no marketing message behind it, right? If you say, hey man, I love the burgers at Pecos Bills, it's just because you want to sell burgers at Pecos Bills, it's because you love it. And I think that's what we might not have Walt on TV anymore, but we have the benefit of that. Different voices, different opinions, different people that resonate with us more. We have that choice, which is what I love and appreciate about being, a content creator and a publisher now.
Yeah, I have to agree. The downside to that is, though, the Disney fans are already sold to. There are like the ones that we're pushing information out to, you're pushing information out to, I'm pushing information. They're already Disney fans. Yeah. And they already know about Disney World, Disneyland. And whereas television is such a big medium. So, but anyways, that's my thought. I think you should go to Disney Plus. Hey, I worked for Pop Culture Guy.
You never know. You never know.
Happened. Any final thoughts as we wind down here, Lou?
No, just and I'm not just saying it because you're here, man, but I appreciate you on so many levels, your friendship and your love and your support, and I love what you're doing now too with the show. I appreciate you inviting me, coming on, and like we were talking about before, I want to acknowledge like the fact that you're so well prepared and you're so thoughtful and insightful in the questions that you ask and the conversation that you have. I hope that you two are able to do this, for 30 more years.
I love doing this. This is like my favorite thing. And
it comes through, man. It totally comes through.
I have you to thank. You were the first podcast I was on. Wow. I can't remember what episode number it was, but it was traveling solo at this world. That was the first. I have you to blame or to thank. I'm not sure which one it is, but it's one or the other.
You're welcome, or I'm sorry. One of the two. Right?
There you go. Well, thank you very much for coming on. I've been doing this for too long without having you on. I'm glad we were finally able to do this. You're welcome on anytime. Don't be a stranger. And with that, Ken, take it away.
If you have a brilliant idea for a future edition of The Solo Show and would like to take your turn in the guest host's chair, then drop us an email at thesoloshow01@gmail.com. Tell us your idea for the show, and we'll contact you about a date and a time for you to join us. If you would just like to keep the conversation going or have a comment about a previous show, then visit us on Facebook at The Solo Show. All logos, sounds, and songs that are made by and for Disney and its affiliates are owned solely by the Disney Corporation and are not, nor are they intended to be, the ownership of The Solo Show podcast. We hope you'll join us for the next adventure on The Solo Show. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.